May your dreams be larger than mountains, and may you have the courage to scale its summits. A quote by Harley King. And when your dreams are to scale the tallest mountains, you do it with sheer courage and determination. My guest today, Naila Kiani, has done just that. A few months ago, I came across a cover story in a local magazine about a Dubai-based young Pakistani mother of two who became the first international mountaineer to reach Mount Everest in 2023. What was even more fascinating is she took to high altitude mountaineering just about 2 years ago when she was already 35 years old. She is the first Pakistani female mountaineer to scale 10 summits over 8,000 meters, an aerospace engineer, a former banker, an amateur boxer, and a wonderful mother to 2 little girls. From the other side, we are in conversation with Naila Kiani. Welcome, Naila.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the nice introduction.
Thank you for coming. Naila, when I read your story for the first time, I had imagined you to be some very feisty young woman, having gone through the mountaineering experience to be that. And 2 days ago when we met up, I was juxtaposing this very soft demeanor that you have, almost non-assuming of the kind of feats you've achieved. I am very intrigued, Naila, to know a little more about what has your childhood been like in terms of your social, cultural, perhaps religious influences that have gone on to define who you are as a person today.
So I had a very tough childhood. When I was growing up, my parents were very strict, very conservative. I wasn't allowed to do a lot of things which are, considered normal for kids to do. So I can openly say I didn't have a happy childhood. So I think my experience during my childhood that made me, I didn't realize that until very recently, that made me very strong mentally. Up until I was 33, I was depressed. For as long as I can remember, I've been depressed. And I used to complain to God that why me? Why do I go through all these struggles? So at one point it was every 3 years. So every 3 years I used to think, okay, I went through a bad experience this year and then it'll happen again every 3 years. Something extremely bad. So I grew up like that, and I used to complain all the time, Allah Ta'ala, why me? Why do I have to go through this? Why people around me, they don't have the life that I have? And I think all of that really made me the person who I am today, but I don't have any regrets anymore because He's blessed me with so much in the last 2 years too.
How wonderful, Naila, how wonderful to see that you've channeled all that you grew up with, which wasn't also pleasant, into something as powerful as what you have done with that. Naila, I kind of now can connect the dots to arrive at the fact that mountaineering perhaps gave you, and perhaps reaching at the top of a mountain gave you the feeling of just being in control of yourself and being assertive. It's in a way combating what you went through in childhood, perhaps depression as you're mentioning. Why mountaineering? Because coming from the geographies that we come from, mountaineering as a sport isn't very popular, and more so even for women to consider this is also a bit unheard of. How did mountaineering happen?
So a couple of reasons. I love mountains. Since I was very young, I remember wanting to go to mountains just to spend time. So I did a trek, K2 base camp trek 5 years ago, and that was my very first time in Himalayas and Karakoram, and I was just mesmerized by the beauty and how big the mountains were. So I met mountaineers there, and I was just very inspired by why they do mountaineering, because I saw a documentary just before going to K2 base camp, and not documentary, I saw a movie called Everest, I think it's called Everest.
Okay.
But basically people died at the end, and I was thinking, and I told my husband, are they crazy? Why do they
Why
go
would
to
they
the
do
top?
this? Yes, you've
Yeah.
often seen documentaries, particularly of mountaineers, where the risk is so high to life,
Yeah.
and you wonder why.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I used to think, that they're crazy, they're risking their lives. But when I met there in person, I was very curious, and I think just because I was curious, a couple of years after that trek, I planned my first mountaineering expedition, and it was a high mountain. It was one of the 8,000-meter mountain in Pakistan. And just to experience the journey, just to experience what mountaineers go through, what does their mind and body go through.
And this was about when?
This was just over 2 years ago, in 2021, in summer.
Right. And prior to that, you had no formal training in
no
mountaineering or anything of that sort?
So my very first experience in the mountains, trek and experiencing a little bit of climbing was when I did the K2 base camp trek in 2018, and after that it was 2021, my very first mountain to climb. But I think the second reason I would like to mention is because I've been a boxer too. So I started boxing when I was at university. Again, something that's not considered to be
very popular, particularly for women.
And also for women from my background. And I did that because I realized I was physically also very strong, and I hid it from my. I think my immediate family knew after a bit, but I didn't talk about boxing openly because I was worried people will judge me, and I did get funny comments that, oh, who will marry you if you do?
Oh dear God. Okay.
I mean, they were funny comments, but of course they weren't ideal. So I was a boxer, I used to compete, so I was an athlete already when I thought about mountaineering. So I think that experience, the boxing, helped me. Physical strength, also mental, because mental strength. So boxing also helped with mental fitness, in my opinion. So I think that also helped me to start mountaineering.
Oh, lovely. And somewhere I'd like to draw some kind of a conclusion from the first perspective that having gone through the kind of experiences that you had in childhood, boxing and mountaineering became those pivotal points for you to be able to just bring yourself together and say, well, I can do it. There's nothing that I can't, in a way. Were there any kind of social, cultural challenges that you had to overcome when you started to take mountaineering as a sport seriously?
Yes. I mean, when I climbed my first mountain, I didn't announce it because I think if I announced it, it'd be people in mountaineering would have found out, and then it would have gone in the media. So I didn't want any attention because I was nervous. I was very nervous, and I was worried about being judged because it's not something associated with women, especially Pakistani women. Also, I was a mother. I had my second baby a few months before attempting to climb this peak. So I was very worried about being judged for risk. I mean, okay, it was a risk, but I had everything agreed. My family agreed, and I had arrangements done for my daughters, and my husband's very hands-on, and alhamdulillah, he's very, very supportive. So I knew that kids will be looked after, but honestly, as a mother, it was very hard. Harder than the mountain, it was harder for me to leave them behind.
I'm sure.
But people don't understand that, and I was very worried about being judged by people. And so my immediate family was fine, and when I managed to climb the peak, then of course everyone was happy, and mountaineering community appreciated that. They didn't believe it, actually. They didn't believe. So when I climbed it, it took me 7 days to come back to the nearest town. That's when I shared the pictures on the on internet. People didn't believe until they saw my picture. I mean, it went in the media, but a lot of mountaineering communities
were skeptical about whether you had actually done it.
Yeah, because some people are not honest about reaching the top. So they thought maybe that I'm doing that too. So they believed it when they saw the picture, and they were shocked because I was not from mountains. Nobody in my family does climbing or mountaineering, and I was a full-time professional mother, and like you said, I was 35. So it was, people considered it to be something that impossible for somebody like me.
Has age ever been a limitation for you in any way?
No, I think I because I didn't have a happy childhood, sometimes I didn't let the inner child in me basically.
How beautiful.
Yeah. So I sometimes feel very young. So I'm 37. I don't feel, I mean, society or even in Pakistan, people consider that once you're over 30, especially a woman,
yes,
that they are.
You get pretty much written off doing a lot of things.
True. But I think that wasn't the case for me. I don't know, somehow I didn't think age was a restriction.
So you kept your little inner child in you intact.
Yes.
And how wonderful, how beautiful is that? Naila, is there anything about mountaineering that has revealed to you about yourself?
I think my strength, I didn't know how strong I was until I started mountaineering.
And when we say strength here, we mean physical and mental, because one doesn't go without the other.
True. I've been scared and about so many things in my life, in my childhood and growing up, my teenage. I had a lot of fears: fear of being judged, fear of speaking up, fear of
your own self-imposed barriers that you had to overcome.
I mean, there was so many. I had an unhappy childhood because of my circumstances, but even internally, because I was scared about so many things, I was unhappy internally too, deep down. Mountains was the first place where I actually felt alive, where I felt like I was fearless. I mean, I still have fears in other areas of my life, but it's mountains where I feel like I don't have any fear. I don't feel scared when I'm very high on the mountain, climbing up. So I think I want to take that out of mountaineering, take being fearless out of mountaineering to other areas of my life.
And that has happened. You've been able to take those lessons and apply it in your daily life?
I'm trying. I'm still trying hard, because obviously for so many years I was scared, nervous, and there are things. I'll give you an example. So I'm very scared. I want to start my own business, and it's something that I wanted to do for a long time. And I tell myself I'm not commercial minded or I'm not creative, but I'm trying to take the lessons out of mountaineering that, I'm fearless. So I'm trying to use that in my in starting a business too. And I'm trying in other areas of my life, because I mentioned it last time we met too. I still have issues with my confidence. Sometimes I don't feel confident in some areas, and I'm like, why?
And this is a woman who has climbed the tallest mountain, so that we know, Mount Everest, in 2023, that's talking about confidence being an issue. Naila, I'm sure that if there are those women who are listening to us today, perhaps wondering whether they can take the first step towards what they're wanting to do, I'm sure from your story and the fact that you're such a real person, talking about your fears just as much you talk about your aspirations, I'm sure they're going to take away a lot from this conversation. The very popular quote that comes to mind is, the only way to fail is to abstain. And unless you've not tried it, you will not know whether you're able to do it at all. Naila, you talked about a few things here, and I also want to go back slightly on when you said that when I am on top of the mountain, I feel fearless almost. What is it that you're saying to yourself when you've reached that peak?
On the summit?
Yes, on the summit.
I think somebody asked me very recently, when I reached the top, one of the things that comes to mind is, oh my God, I made it.
Okay.
Because it's obviously the journey, although I feel fearless, it's very hard. And we don't know, it could be because of external factors, whether we'll reach the top or not. So first feeling is sense of relief. And then also a bit of nervousness, because we have to go down.
Right.
So it's actually at the base camp where we feel, oh my God, we just climbed that mountain and we came back safely, because coming back safely
is equally important. It's not just about going up and putting the flag up there, but it's also the way back to the base camp.
Yes, and I think this year I climbed 7 mountains above 8,000 meters.
Fantastic.
And it's only very recently, so I was climbing one mountain after the other. and it's until very recently, so I came back from my last expedition a month ago, and I think only because I don't have any expedition planned for the next 5 months or so, so I have time to think about what I've done this year. And it's only a couple of weeks ago I realized, wow, what I've done.
What you've done is so wonderful.
Yeah.
You had mentioned to me in our conversation, and in fact I read about it as well in your story, that there was an accident that happened in your last summit. And what exactly had happened? So
on my last expedition, it was actually in Tibet, China. It was meant to be my 11th mountain. So I had climbed 10 mountains before that in the last 2 years. And when we were going up, we were very close to summit, just about 400 meters below summit, when an avalanche hit and it took down 3 climbers from my team. So we stopped, and we didn't know because they were quite 300 meters below us. So we couldn't see what happened, basically whether somebody's died or not. So we stopped, and then some people were still considering going up, and I think something happened. Usually I'm not very decisive. I take time, I consider lots of factors, and then I make my decision, but I take a long time to decide. But that time, straight away, I knew that I had to go down. So I decided that I'm going down. My expedition leader told me and other climbers in the group to go up, but I knew somehow.
So intuitively you figured that it's time that you turn back.
Exactly. Usually that time, if climbers are so close to summit, we get something like called a summit fever, that we think we're so close to summit, we have to go. We have to go up. But I decided to go down, and without any regret. I just knew it's good time. That time I didn't know exactly what happened to other climbers. So I turned around, and after 20 minutes I heard there was another avalanche on the way going up that took down 3 more climbers. So I mean, 4 climbers unfortunately passed away, they died, and then 2 climbers were injured. So I came down, and I for a month or so after the accident, I just was not ready, to basically, I didn't socialize. I just stayed at home, and I didn't really speak to anybody.
But that's completely understandable. But I'm sure that must have lent you a lot of confidence in terms of listening to your inner voice, despite whatever the external factors be.
I mentioned having lots of fears. I think that's what contribute to me being indecisive, because I worry about so many things. But then I think it was that incident that made me realize that I need to listen to what's coming from inside, my gut feeling, or whatever I feel. The first thing that I feel, I need to listen to that feeling instead of speaking to 10 people and then making my decision. And also, I think another thing that I realized during that time was basically humility. I am a very humble person, and but I think the accident happened because there were 2 women basically competing with each other, and if they basically said let's go together and went up together, maybe we don't know whether we could have avoided the accident or not, but we cannot compete with nature.
Would you say, Naila, having gone through all these experiences that you have, today the relationship that you have with yourself is a lot stronger than it has been before?
It is, for sure. And I never, like I said, all the fears I had, one of the biggest one was I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. But all the experience I had recently, I think they helped me realize actually I am good enough.
Yes.
I may have some weaknesses, I may have some things to work on, but I am good enough. Sometimes I tell myself I am an amazing person.
Yes, you are. Absolutely.
But because that's not how I used to think.
Yes.
But there's nothing wrong. And even I hesitated just now in front of you because I was like, can I say it or not?
Can I say the word? And it's okay to say it because it's the truth, and we need to the more we confront ourselves as honestly as possible, it's just a better way to be. An empty jug cannot fill anyone's cup.
True.
And if we feel fulfilled, it's only then that we can fulfill the relationships that we are surrounded by. And I'm sure that has also impacted the relationships that you have today with perhaps your children, with your spouse, with your friends, in terms of feeling fulfilled, right?
Yes, definitely. I can see a huge difference. I think mountaineering helped me realize and helped me realize my self-worth and my friendship with myself. And I can see a big difference in my relationship with people around me.
Naila, what kind of physical, mental training do you need to go through before any of your expeditions? Would you tell us a little bit about that?
So physical fitness, I live in Dubai, and we don't usually, the best form of training for mountaineering is climbing mountains, climbing small mountains or trekking, but because I don't have the opportunity here, so I worked a lot on my strength, endurance and cardio training. Cardio a little bit less compared to
endurance.
Yes, but I mean, even cardio is very important, but
right.
in my case I focus more on strength and endurance,
right.
and that helped me on the mountains. I think mental strength personally, like I said, my experiences from past helped me to be very fit mentally. I didn't know whether I was strong or not when I climbed my first mountain.
So whatever you've been able to gather is only from your own experiences that you've drawn in and used that.
Yes.
Yeah. And if there is anybody who is wanting to start mountaineering, is there any, what would you tell them? What would be the starting point?
So mountaineering, I would say if somebody has no experience and they want to experience it, then start with hiking. Hiking basically is one day.
Sure. And we have lots of hiking spots in
yes.
Dubai, and this is the best time of the year for it as well.
Yes, true. So hiking is good to just taste what's it like to be in the mountains. And then trekking. Trekking is basically 2+ days in the mountains. Right. Trekking will give you an idea of what it'll be like in the mountain.
Right.
And
the conditions that you could possibly, because you're going to spend more days out in there.
Yes.
In that environment.
True. So you'll basically camp in the mountain. It'll be freezing cold. So it'll give you an idea of what it'll be like. And then if you still like it, because not everybody, I mean, climbing sounds glamorous, I'll be honest, to some people. Obviously, some people hate it, some people don't understand it, some people are fascinated by it, and some people want to try it, but they don't know once they try camping or eating in the wild or the very cold conditions, yeah. They either love it or hate it. So trekking is perfect for somebody who wants to experience climbing, and if they like trekking, then they can after that they can pick a 4,000 or 5,000 meter mountain and then decide. So these are actually
stepping stones towards going the full yard.
Yes, I was physically very fit because of my boxing experience, mentally very strong because of my childhood, and also I think my body is maybe, compared to other people, it gets used to the lack of oxygen better than others, naturally.
Right.
And it's not the case for everybody, because I've known people who even at 4,000 meters they struggle with the lack of oxygen. So that's why it's very important for people to do it step by step, just at least
just to ascertain whether this is something you can endure.
Yes, the lack of oxygen part.
Right. How interesting. Naila, you today as a mother of 2 little girls, do you assess your risk taking differently than you would if you weren't a mother?
Yes, and that I realized on the last mountain too. I already shared that I was only 400 meters below the summit when I decided to turn back, and it's not something easy for mountaineers, because even when I was there, a lot of climbers who were with me, they were considering, they weren't too sure, they wanted to go but they weren't sure, and then my expedition leader asked my team to go up. So I know that 2 of them, took a couple of mountaineers, and even in my team, they really wanted to go because it's very expensive. We already spent days to get up to that stage, but I was sure that I want to go down. And I think one factor that contributed to me making that decision was perhaps my daughters, because I knew that I have two small girls waiting for me at home, and if I wasn't a mother, I think I'd probably be like other mountaineers there who really would
have taken the risk of going up there. But in hindsight, it was a good thing you didn't.
Yes, and also another experience, I mean, when I was on K2 mountain, K2 is a very dangerous mountain, and I was very close to summit, and it was freezing cold, and we were above an area called Bottleneck, which is known to be a dangerous area, and we were climbing on blue ice, which is basically even harder to climb because our crampons, the equipment on the spiky equipment on our shoes, it doesn't basically it doesn't.
It kind of slips.
It slips.
There's no grip on it.
True, it slips on blue ice. So that was one moment on K2 when I was a little bit scared. I was scared, and I told myself, I have 2 daughters waiting for me at home. I cannot give up. So I mean, as we said, I hadn't eaten properly for days, and I hadn't slept properly for many days, but I still found energy in myself.
Just the thought that for your little girls is where you pushed yourself?
I pushed myself, and I was even more focused. I was even more aware of the conditions around me, and I made sure that I will not make any mistake from my side. So they really, people think daughters are my weakness.
But that really served as your strength.
Yes.
And how beautiful is that? I want to also understand, because obviously you've done a range of summits and 10 summits over 8,000 meters. You've talked about K2 being, would that be your most challenging so far, you'd say?
K2 is one of the most dangerous, but it's, for me, G2, Gasherbrum 2 mountain was the most challenging mountain.
And why was that?
So it's because even on the easiest terrain, because no mountain is easy, but some terrains are easier than the other. If the weather is not good, if the conditions are not good, then they can be very, very hard to climb. So on Gasherbrum,
and when we say hard to climb, is the element of threat to life also associated with it always?
Yes. So on Gasherbrum 2, the mountain we usually climb with a rope, and I climb with a guide. And on Gasherbrum 2, there was hardly any rope, and the weather, I mean, obviously I go up because of being a mother, I go up when the weather is good. But sometimes on the mountain it's hard to forecast the weather 100%.
Unless you're there, up there.
Even if you're there, we get the forecast from companies, and we get live forecast too. Yes. We have a satellite device. When I say live, I mean we get weather forecast on our devices, but then sometimes it goes wrong because it's very hard to predict mountain weather in Karakoram in Himalayas, because they're so high. Then cloud
things could change very quickly, is what you're saying.
And that's what happened on Gasherbrum 2. So there was no rope, and the weather was very bad all of a sudden, and it's a technical mountain. So if you're stepping on snow, it's basically easier to climb on snow. But if it's rock and ice, it's not easy because you can easily slip without a rope. So it was and
you did this without the rope?
Without the rope. So I climbed a few mountains. So Gasherbrum 1 was without rope. Annapurna top, there were some sections without the rope. And last mountain, Shisha Pangma, it didn't have any rope. Without the rope, it's quite hard to climb.
What are your next goals? Having reached the highest peak in the world, what is it now that you're aspiring to do with your endeavors of mountaineering?
So a couple of things. When it comes to mountaineering, I'd like to complete the 14 peaks because there are 14 mountains in the world which are above 8,000 meters.
Okay.
And I always like to give this reference because a lot of people don't understand what's 8,000 meter. And sometimes they confuse it with 8,000 feet. Sometimes, because I used to write, so last year when I climbed 3 mountains above 8,000 meter, and in the media they write 3 8,000 meters, so people were confusing it to 38,000 feet, 38,000 meters. So I like to use the reference of Burj Khalifa, which is about 800 meters. So times that by 10,
that's 8,000 meters.
That's 8,000 meters.
And so there are 14 8,000 meter summits?
So there are 14 mountains which are above 8,000 meters. So for example, K2, Mount Everest is 8,800 plus.
Sure.
K2 is 8,611. So so they're all above 8,000 meters. So
and you've done 10 already?
I've done 10. I have 4 left.
4 left to go. And do you have a time plan within which that you're wanting to accomplish it?
So I was planning to complete them as soon as possible, mainly because of my kids. But what happened on Shisha Pangma, my last mountain, I am taking it a bit slow. Initial plan was to climbing all of them by spring next year.
Right.
But I think I'll maybe split them, 2 in spring and 2 later on.
Right.
And non-mountaineering objective or plan is to inspire other people. Because
how wonderful and how lovely. I was just going to come to that, but please tell me more.
So when I climbed my first peak, and I mean, for me, I didn't realize the impact it had on others, because it was my personal objective. I wanted to experience what other mountaineers were feeling. And when I reached the top, I came down, I had no idea, and I started getting messages from women in Pakistan especially. Now I get messages from women outside of Pakistan too. But they said my story is inspiring because me being a mother of 2 young kids and, you know, above 35 and a full-time professional, I was able to do something that other people considered impossible. And
absolutely.
There were so many stereotypes that I was breaking, not just one. So and then the more mountains I climbed, initially up until last year, I was really doing it for myself because it was my personal project. But I think I want to use my story to inspire as many people as I can, because all of us, I think, okay, I say I had a challenging childhood, but the more people I speak to, although I used to think when I was growing up that people around me, they don't have any problem. But when you speak to people, every single person has some sort of problem, has a story to tell. And some people went through maybe more problems than the other, but everyone has a story to tell. And I just want to help everybody realize, or whoever needs to hear my story, that you can do whatever you want to do. You just need to change your own mindset.
It's so encouraging to hear what you're saying, because one of the pillars on which From the Other Side podcast pegs itself is exactly this, that we are the story we tell ourselves. And if you're going to tell yourself and remind yourself only of your limitations, then that's how you're going to navigate your life through it. So this is just wonderful to hear, Naila, and I'm sure a lot of young mothers and a lot of young women over the age of 35, and I like to say young because I don't believe age is any limiting factor, find and draw inspiration from what you've done and don't give up on themselves. Naila, are there any, and I ask this pretty much to all my guests pretty much towards the end of the podcast, if there are any disciplines or non-negotiables, as I like to call it, that you practice on a daily basis?
So yes, there's something that I do a lot. So every time I leave home, and every time on the mountains, and every time I did say I'm fearless on the mountain, but every time I feel scared, I just read this dua. So it's a dua or prayer for journey. Subhanalladhi sakhara lana hada wa ma kunna lahu muqrinin wa inna ila rabbina lamunqalibun. Every single time I feel scared. So every day this is something that I don't change. And this year was a bit extreme for me because I was in and out of Dubai, traveling a lot. So I was struggling to think of something else. But I think this is important, because even if you're not religious, or even if you don't practice Islam, just use any affirmation, say something positive to yourself, that I'm good enough, I'm confident, I'm beautiful. Anything that makes you feel good. And this prayer makes me really feel good, and it feels like it'll protect me.
How beautiful is this? Naila, if there is this one thing that you could tell every single person in the world, what would that one thing be?
Believe in yourself. I think for so long I didn't know how strong and how powerful I am. And it's only until recently that I know that I'm strong and powerful. If only I knew this many years ago, maybe I'd live a happier life. But I think everything happens for a reason, and if I could go back in time, I'd, all the issues I have, the lack of confidence, the lack of self-belief, I'd work on that much sooner than this.
So believe in yourself?
Believe in yourself. Because every one of us have potential to be the best version of ourselves. Every single one of us. We just need to realize it, and we just need to show the world.
Beautiful. And that's so true and powerful. Thank you, Naila.
Thank you.
It is not just the mountains we conquer, but ourselves in its presence. A quote by Ansel Adams. And it couldn't be more appropriate way to end this conversation with Naila Kiani for now. Thank you, Naila,
Thank
for
you
coming.
so
It was
much.
an
Thank
absolute
you.
pleasure, and wish you all the best
Thank
for your
you.
future endeavors.